Everything that I'm thinking, someone's already thought that. So all the things that I'm doing, they've all been said. So what's the point of it all? But there's something kind of comforting about the idea that everything that we've thought about, somebody else has already thought about them before. Just a pinball in a pinball machine. And there's thousands, millions, billions of other pinballs, depending upon how big you consider this pinball machine. And they're all kind of obeying the laws of physics. They're all bouncing off of each other in a sort of a uniform chaos. But within each interaction, that kind of obeys the laws of physics. And we just kind of run along this interaction trammel process that leads us to where we are today. So all of our actions, all of our thoughts, well, they've all been kind of not quite destined, but they're running on an automatic process that we can't see in advance, but which appears, with the benefit of hindsight, to be kind of automatic, you know, somewhat preordained. So I got into thinking, all right, so if that's not unique, if even my thoughts aren't unique, what am I? Is there anything about me which is unique? Or am I just kind of an expression of the world? Yeah? And I kind of thought and I thought and I thought. And then I thought, well, look, the way that I express myself, well, that's pretty unique. It might be derivative. It might be based around someone else's performance that I resonated with. But the things that I'm talking about, even though I don't necessarily choose my thoughts, I become aware of my thoughts, the things that I'm talking about are relatively unique because they are the conclusions of my experiences today. Okay, so I definitely don't choose my thoughts. I'm aware that I do not choose my thoughts. I suddenly become aware of the thought. But what comes after my perception, my conclusion based around that, now that is pretty unique to me because that is related to all of my prior understandings. Now you can say that this entire chain of prior understandings was in itself also preordained. Indeed, I'm willing to go along with that. That's all part of the pinball bouncing across everybody else's pinballs. But nonetheless, the end result of that chain is somewhat unique. So I think, and the reason I'm doing the video for this, is that there's something kind of comforting about that. There's something pretty fabulous about that. Because it kind of knocks an element of the foundation of your ego away. It turns out that you're not as important as you thought you were, that you're just indeed an expression of the world. And so when you muck stuff up, it's not necessarily your choice. And similarly, when you do something incredibly, amazingly fantastic, that probably wasn't all yours either. It was probably a great deal to do with chance or happenstance or the butterfly flapping its wings in Tokyo. And so you kind of reach a relativization. You contextualize yourself in a less egotistical way. So the end result is somewhat beautiful. But then you're left with, so what's the point? Who cares? If it's all preordained, if my pinball's just going to bounce until it disintegrates and fades off into the distance, well then what is the point? I think once you've neutralized yourself, once you've dissolved your ego to a certain extent where you are simply the interrelation of all things, you are an extension of all things, and you are an expression of the universe, you can kind of free yourself from what it was that you thought you were. You're no longer struggling against the system. There's a beautiful heron just come next to me. It is blowing a gale up there. And I found a little valley, And yeah, a stork, beautiful stork, is just nestled next to me. Where was I? Once you've freed your ego, once you're no longer as important as you thought you were, and you are struggling less against the system, it doesn't mean that you're capitulating into the system, but that you are relating with the system in a more resonant fashion, let's say. You're struggling less against. You have goals, you have thoughts, you have aims, you have wishes, you have rules and core values and needs, but you've kind of comprehended your lack of knowing or your lack of power and your symbiotic relationship with all things. Well, then what you're left with is a pursuit of your own well-being. Yeah, I wouldn't call it a pursuit of happiness, because any emotion is going to be transient, but a pursuit perhaps of your own understanding, your own serenity, the reflection of the universe's beauty through you, perhaps you might want to call it. Yeah, that if you're going to be an expression of the universe, well then, hey, let's be a fabulous expression of the universe. Yeah, so although it's freeing, it's a massive gift. It's a massive gift. It's allowing you to express yourself whilst understanding that what you think you are isn't true, that it's an expression of an element of this little p on the top of the subconscious massive autonomic process that's trying to lay claim to what you are, but that is just a little narrative, let's say. But that within that there is a you, there is a self behind the thought processes that you can honor. And the more you understand this kind of powerlessness, this symbiotic relationship with all things, the more you can kind of give your fellow man a break, the more you can give the universe a break, the less pushing against the system and the more engaging with the system there is. And you end up with a more serene existence. You end up with a more beautifying existence. You end up more thankful. You end up more curious. You end up much more grateful, less egotistical, more calm, more centered. So all that comes from something knocking your ego. It all comes from being told that, you know, you don't really have an original thought inside your mind. That all those original thoughts that you thought, someone's already thought them. We each have our individual channel, yeah? And it's extraordinary how, you know, I'm here, I'm on this beautiful stream, right? There are stones across the stream. There are a multitude of ways to step across the stream. And when you're standing on this side, you have no idea how to cross the stream, you know? So you put your foot a couple of stones in, and then you keep on going, and you find your way, and eventually you find yourself on the other side of the stream, yeah? But then when you look back, you can see the stones that you took, and it makes sense from the other side. Everything makes sense when you're looking backwards, but when you're looking forwards, it's not, because you're living that in the moment, but you're doing so with an element of inevitability, because at that moment there's only one choice which is right, and all along the process you're constantly exhibiting that decision which feels like you're making the decision, but which happens to be right. End result is everything is beautiful. Everything is harmonious. It's a rhapsody. It's a rhapsody. And we get to play a little part in that rhapsody. Yeah? Isn't that funny? All from being told that I'm not as important as I thought I was. Or coming to the conclusion that I kind of already knew, but that I'd already forgotten, sort of thing. Life gives us these reminders of the stuff which is most important. Anyway, go chew on that. All right, take care. Bye.